everybody, welcome to yet another video. So today we're having a look at both Chinese guns. It's the Chinese NVE, that's a 1.3 gun. It's a loose copy of a DV1 Devilbiss, and we're looking at the YT160, which is a loose copy of the Iwata W400. I'll explain a little bit more about it as we go along, but they're loose copies of both of those. I'll put a few links in the description. One of them will be the NVE v the DV1. You're not getting with this, you're not getting a cheap Devilbiss, you know, works as well as a Devilbiss but is cheaper. You're not getting that, but you are getting a reasonable spray gun for, you know, pretty reasonable money. Now, the observant among you and people that watch the channel regularly will know that I've done a few videos on, I think I've done two or one on the YT160, I think one actually, but I've done a few videos on the NVE, but none of them for base coat, so this is purely for base coat. What we've got, I had actually a chap message me the other day saying that the panels seem to be the same, you know, the same in a lot of your videos, or some of your videos. The two car panels seem to be the same, and they are. I normally do bike stuff, but I've got a couple of sets of two tanks, so two tanks that are the same, another two tanks that are the same, and these two, we call them wings, you call them fenders, I think, in the US, that are exactly the same, and that's for a reason. The reason for that is that you can actually see, or I hope you can see, I can put these side by side and hopefully we can see any differences. Also, you can see the speed of the gun, so you can see how long it takes me. Obviously, I'm the same painter, so everything's the same except for the gun, so you can see how long it takes to finish a panel, particularly with clear coat and things like that, because I would always use the same clear coat, etc. And it just allows you to see any differences in the gun. If I say to you a gun is faster than another gun, when you look at these two panels, you'll be able to watch it back and think, oh yeah, you know, to do the final coat on that one, it took him 16 seconds with whatever, and it took him 25 seconds to do with the other one. And that's what I mean by speed. And hopefully I try and get as close to the work as I can, so that you can get an idea of, you know, the amount of orange peel it produces. And obviously my experience of the guns is far more than just these two panels, but it's a good way, I think, to show you the differences between the two. So you'll see me here using a microwave to warm the base coat up. This is not the thing you're supposed to do. I'm sure it's unsafe, although it is something I do. People do ask me about it. As I say, I wouldn't recommend you do it at all, but what I do, it depends on the ambient temperature. The ambient temperature on this day was 9 degrees Celsius, which is, what's that when it's at home, about 47 Fahrenheit, something like that. So not particularly warm. So I warm the base coat up to normally about 25, 30, maybe even 35 degrees Celsius. It just helps the base coat go off quicker. I also warm the panel up as well. I use the microwave for about 10 seconds per 100 milliliter of mixed clear coat or base coat. As I say, it really isn't recommended. I'm sure it's unsafe. I've never had any problems. The only time I left the clear, I was going to put it on for 10 seconds and I put it on for a minute, the clear coat, you know, and you go off and do something else. If I haven't got a camera on my head, I'll sometimes do things a little bit differently because I'm not worried about footage, if that makes sense. So I left it on for a minute instead of 10 seconds. I just pushed the minute thing instead of seconds. And when I went back to it, it hadn't taken the door off the building or the microwave, but it had made the clear coat into like a sludge, just nearly gone off, which was fine. I mean, it's better than, you know, blowing the doors off, to quote a very well-known film. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend it, but I find it really good. For base coat, it helps speed the drying process up. So particularly if it's cold weather, it gets the base coat dry. Couple of reasons for that. I find the best reason for it really is that it obviously speeds the process up, but it also means that the base coat stays wet for less time. So if you have got impurities in the atmosphere, it stops it becoming such a problem, because if the base coat's dry and something lands on it, you just dust it before you put the next coat on. If it lands on it and it's still wet, obviously it becomes a problem. So the quicker you can get the base coat dry, the better, in my opinion. Although you obviously need it to go on wet for it to cover the panel properly. But yeah, it's a bit of a balance. But I find the microwave works really good, and the 10-second rule per 100 milliliter works fine for me for base coat and for clear coat and for primer for that matter. So going back to the two guns, sorry to rub it off on something else, but a few people have asked me about it. The NVE and the YT160. Now the NVE, when I first got this, was around about 100. I paid for, I'm in the UK, so we use pound sterling, but I pay for everything in US dollars normally on AliExpress, and I paid about 104 US dollars for it. Looking at them now, and I do realise, again, going off subject again, or keeping on it a little bit, I suppose, I do realise that it depends where you are as to whether these guns are available and to how much they are. I know a lot of governments have imposed purchase taxes on various imports, etc. And I get these from AliExpress. Companies like or platforms like AliExpress need to add those taxes on. So if I say something's, 45 US dollars, in the US it probably is 45 US dollars, but in Australia it might be 95, 100 Australian dollars, which is about 75 US dollars, about 65 GB pounds. So it does vary as to where you are, but taking it from my point of view, being in the UK and paying in US dollars, I paid about 103, 104 US dollars for the NVE, and now looking at them, they're about 72, 73 US dollars. So they're starting to come down in price. The YT160 cost me about 45, 50 US dollars, I think. So it's still a cheaper gun, but performance-wise, looking at these two, for base coat and for clear coat, I would rather have the NVE. There is a caveat to that, and another reason why I wanted to get another video out on the NVE was that I've had a few people contact me that have bought these NVEs, not necessarily on my recommendation, but have bought these NVEs, and they've had trouble with some of the seals. They've had trouble with the seal, the needle packing seal. You know, where you put the needle through, the needle goes through the gun and it goes into the tip, and there's normally a packing gland behind the tip on the rear of the gun, and that part there has been leaking material through, and that can be a problem, because what it can do is it can run up the needle and into the back of the gun where the air is. So that's been a problem for a few people. The seal at the front is also a bit suspicious. You can't get spare parts for these, so when that seal goes, it has and again, I'll put a link in the description. I did an unboxing of the NVE, and we physically compared it to the DV1 gun, and you'll see the packing and what I'm on about, the gasket, which is called a packing at the front. And obviously it uses a similar principle to the old GTI Pro Light, the Devilbiss GTI Pro Light, and of course the copy GTI Pro Lights. And that on all of my Pro Lights, that's my fake Pro Lights, that's been a bit suspect. And indeed on the real Pro Lights it's been a bit suspect, but it's easy to get spare parts for and not particularly expensive to replace that part. So just bear in mind, if you go for the NVE, you might get reduced longevity. I haven't heard of any problems with the YT160, but the YT160 hasn't been out particularly long. It's a development of the R500. They're all made by a company called Rongpeng, which is a Chinese company, and they've effectively tweaked it styling wise. And they make it for different companies. So you'll get a black version of this called an Air Pro A610. Now, I got the first A610, and they made it a smaller, wetter pattern, which a lot of people didn't like. So with the YT160 in this video, you'll see that the pattern is definitely an I pattern. So it's a tall, thin pattern rather than what's a SATA call an O pattern. So a more concentrated, wetter pattern. There's a couple of things with that. The bigger eye pattern I find better for base coat than for clear coat, simply because with the smaller, wetter pattern, it wets up quicker and it just seems to, in my opinion, do a better job. But for base coat, which we're using in this video, the pattern that the YT160 makes, which you see there, is quite a long, thin pattern, is actually ideal for base coat. In this video, both of these guns were used at between 2.5 and 3 turns out on the fluid. So it's literally probably about 60% fluid. So you could get a wetter pattern on both of these. And that's up to you, what you're doing, what colour you're doing, and whether you actually want that. I prefer normally with these panels, because they are only test panels, they don't really matter. I just prefer normally about 3 coats of base coat just to give them the colour, and then we go on and clear them later. And as I say, they're not actually going anywhere, they're just for us to just a medium for me to convey what I think, and something that visually looks the same that you can compare. That's the idea of it. So the YT160 is cheaper. I think it personally, it will probably last longer. I haven't had any people tell me they've had problems with the R500, which, as I say, is effectively an earlier version, but it's made by the same company. I haven't had people tell me that they've had problems with the A610, which is effectively a black version of this. It's a different make, but it is the same gun. The only thing I've had people tell me with the A610 is that they thought they had a problem with the A610 when they first had it. And AeroPro, which are the company that sell under their banner, sell the 610, changed the caps for them. And all they've done is change them for the cap in this. So the caps on the A610 and this are actually interchangeable. And so are the tips. The tips are a direct copy of the W400, which is what we was talking about earlier. Again, I'll put a few links in the description. There's lots of different videos I've done on these. I'll put lots of links in the description so that you can, find out more information on either of them as far as the workings of them go, if you want to. But looking at this test we did here with just these 2 guns, if you wanted to pick a winner, and I know I'm a long way round at getting to a winner, but it would be the NVE, even though I think it's probably going to last less time. In my opinion, it's a better clear gun. It's a better base coat gun. It feels better. It's actually heavier. It's about, I think, 60 grams heavier than the Y160 or the A610, either of those two. You can use it at lower pressure. I used it at 1.8 bar, which is about 25 psi for this video, and I used the YT160 at 2 bar. For clear coat, the NVE you can use at 2 bar, so 29 psi, and get very good results. The YT160, you will need that at 2.5 bar, so about 36 psi, to get good results also. So although the NVE uses more air, and that is, to some people that's going to be a big problem, when you consider it actually runs at a lower pressure, the difference in consumption isn't that huge. And bear in mind, we're talking about with the YT160, and bear in mind this is the same cap as uses the same amount of air as the R500, you get a case and scenario on AliExpress where sellers are telling you that the AirPro R500 is using 4.5 CFM, and this one comes up at 12 CFM. In reality, it's about 7.5 to 8 CFM, and the NVE I would think is probably about 10 CFM. But it's definitely, even though, as I say, it won't last as long, I would actually prefer the NVE because I just think it feels nicer and it does produce slightly better results. We get to when we get to the end of the video, I normally do a shoot outside of the two panels together, but I didn't. I did it inside because it was pouring with rain. I didn't want to get the panels wet because I was going to clear them afterwards. Even though they're test panels, I still like to keep to the fact that you should apply your clear coat pretty quickly onto your base coat. You know, half an hour to an hour. It does depend what base coat you use, but most of them only have quite a small window to get it on. If you leave it to the next day, and I know a lot of people have been telling me that they do this, and then they put the clear coat on, it will come back to bite you afterwards. As I say, these panels don't really matter, so you know, I don't have to do it that way, but I do still like to do it that way because it's the way you're supposed to do it and the way that it works. But if you put your clear coat over your base coat, say the next day, it's going to bite you afterwards, because what will happen, it'll look fine in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 months, you'll start to get delamination. The clear coat will start to come away from the base coat, because the base coat, although it's dry to the touch, is still chemically wet or damp, for want of a better word. So it's much more receptive to the solvents in the clear coat, and that's what bonds it to it. That's what bonds the clear coat to the base coat. So if you let all those solvents dry out of the base coat and then come along with your clear coat, sorry, you will get delamination. It may take 3 months, it may take 6 months, but it won't be as good a job. So just bear that in mind if you are, you know, relatively new to painting. If you do happen to need to leave the base coat overnight, then a quick coat of base coat, the same colour as obviously you've used, will liven it up again. Or you can use a clear base coat. Just put one coat of that on it, it livens the base coat up again, and then you can use the clear coat. Or you can use a grey Scotch-Brite to rough it up. I don't like doing that because sometimes you can get slight imperfections and then you notice it when you clear coat. Anyway guys, I hope as always you enjoyed the video. Sorry I rabbit on about stuff that's not always relevant, but hopefully you enjoy the videos anyway. And if you are enjoying them, think about giving us a thumbs up and a subscription. Cheers guys.